This incident, which occurred at a military base, lost in the sands of the Mojave Desert, spread throughout America and shocked everyone with incredible cruelty. This case shows well how an amazing love story can turn into a terrible tragedy because of one thoughtless act. This story begins at a military base, near a place called 29 Palms, a town located in San Bernardino County, California. Military personnel arriving at the base most often live with their families in a military camp. It is to this base that newly assigned Marine John Corwin and his young wife Erin arrive in September 2013. Erin was a great lover of animals, having a rare talent for taming even the most unruly animals. She met her future husband John in the 5th grade. They were a classic small-town American couple who wrote poems to each other and really, as their friends said, loved each other. In a military town, the young people meet the Lee family who live next door to them, Chris, Nicole, and their 6-year-old daughter Liberty. The neighbors immediately became friends, and while their husbands disappeared all day long serving at the base, their wives often spent time together visiting each other. When John and Chris were home, the couples often barbecued and watched movies. After some time, John and Erin began to have quarrels over money, and life on a military base in the desert added to the difficulties. It seemed that everything was going well when Erin became pregnant. She was overjoyed. But unfortunately, a few weeks after the news of her pregnancy, Erin had a miscarriage. This event further affected their marriage. However, 6 months later, in the summer of 2014, when the woman was being examined in the hospital, the doctor told her the good news. She was pregnant with twins. A week after Erin found out she was pregnant for the second time, she went to Joshua Tree National Park. Her mother was coming to stay with her, and she wanted to explore several routes in the park to give her mother an excursion. Around 7:30 a.m., Erin kissed John goodbye, told him she loved him, and left. By evening, she had not returned, and no matter how many times John called her phone, received an answering machine. John reported his wife missing to the police only 24 hours later. It was strange. John was well aware that the temperature in the desert in summer reaches above 35 degrees, and it is very easy to get sunstroke and lose consciousness in such conditions. All this is aggravated by poor cellular coverage in that area. We should also not forget about wild animals and rapid dehydration that inevitably occurs in such conditions. A young pregnant woman gets lost in the desert and, taking into account all the above-mentioned dangers, her husband reports her missing only a day later. This fact raised big questions for the police. Detectives began an active search and work with those around the missing woman. John immediately became the main suspect in his wife's disappearance. Family friends Connor and Aisling Maliki, as well as Chris and Nicole Lee, were questioned. Investigators were immediately interested in Chris. His colleagues told the officers that he was very fond of weapons. In his unit, Chris gained a reputation as a rash, reckless man. Chris also served for some time in Iraq, where he took part in combat operations, from where he returned, according to his friends, greatly changed. When interviewing Nicole, Chris's wife, new details in the case emerged. At some point, Nicole felt that her husband had lost interest in her. She did not understand what this was connected with, and one day she got into Chris's phone, where she found correspondence between Chris and Erin. Nicole immediately created a scandal for her husband, and also called and told John that she suspected their spouses of treason, but passion subsided over time. Chris's military service was scheduled to end on July 4, 2014, after which he, Nicole, and their daughter were supposed to return to their home state of Alaska. The more the police immersed themselves in this story, the clearer it became to them that most likely this was a crime against the backdrop of jealousy. Meanwhile, volunteers and search parties combed Joshua Tree National Park. A helicopter from the local sheriff's department was brought in, but everyone understood that the search could take a very long time, since the search area was too large and inaccessible. At the same time, John's alibi was carefully checked and all suspicions were removed from him. The police continued to interview friends and acquaintances and found out new details. It turns out that after the scandal with the revelation of the relationship between Erin and Chris, the young people did not stop communicating. The romance quickly gained momentum, and soon the couple were already discussing leaving their spouses. And what a wonderful stepmother Erin would be for Liberty, Chris's daughter, with whom she often babysat when Nicole was busy. Connor Malachi, Chris's co-worker, told police that on June 28th, he and Chris had planned a trip to Joshua Tree Park to hunt coyotes, but he was unable to go because his friends came, and Chris went alone, taking his rifle with him. It was on June 28th that Erin went to the park to inspect the routes along which she wanted to take her mother and disappeared. As the police found out by questioning Erin's friends from her native Tennessee, the girl's trip to the park to inspect the route was a cover. She told her friend in correspondence that Chris had invited her on a date to some unknown place in the park. He called it a surprise. The woman was sure that this would be a romantic date where the man would give her a ring and propose. Having learned these new details, the police immediately took Chris Lee into custody. At this time, Erin's car was accidentally discovered by a driver passing on the highway. She stood about 16 kilometers from Joshua Tree Park. It turned out that all this time the search was going on in the wrong place. Police found tire tracks from another vehicle near the car. It looked as if Erin drove up to a standing car, got into it, and left hers. The police obtained a search warrant for Chris's property, and in the search history of his computer's browser, they found requests for how to dispose of the body. While searching the man's car, detectives found a homemade garrote. Chris was brought in for questioning and told the police how he and Erin became close. They got together when the woman was experiencing depression after a miscarriage, and he came back from the war with a deep shock. He also told investigators that Erin was a victim of domestic violence and John repeatedly raised his hand to her. When the officer asked how far their relationship went, Chris said that they only kissed and nothing more. The man also explained that he was not going to leave his wife and daughter for the sake of a relationship with Erin, and only she really wanted this. The investigator asked Chris where he was on June 28th, the day the woman disappeared. The man replied that he was alone in Joshua Tree Park hunting coyotes. The police told Chris that Erin's friends had reported that she was going to meet him at the park that day, and that the car had been found. The detectives resorted to a trick, telling the suspect that they knew that his car was also there, determining this from the tire tread prints. Immediately, Chris changed his story. He said that he actually saw Erin's car that day and drove up to her to inspect it because it seemed strange to him that the car was sitting empty. Afterwards, he left and did not tell the police about it, only because they would immediately suspect him of involvement in the disappearance. The change in testimony during the interrogation was very suspicious. But all this was indirect evidence, and after a 9-hour interrogation, the man was released. The interrogation of Chris's wife also yielded nothing. It seemed that she was covering for her husband by repeating the same learned legend. A week after Erin's disappearance, Chris was discharged from the U.S. Army, and the whole family returned home to Alaska. Since the police did not have strong evidence to arrest the man, although investigators were sure that Chris was involved in the disappearance. From the owner of the horse farm, where the Corwin and Lee families sometimes went for rides, information was received that Chris had been exploring old mines in the desert for a long time. That had remained there since the time of the gold rush. This was a clue. The police switched search efforts to the mines, calling in speleologists. But there was a big problem. There were hundreds of these mines, and the search could lead to nothing. August 16, 2016 was the last day of the search. The cavers were already packing up their camp and equipment when they found her in one of the last mines they checked. Its depth was about 85 meters. A probe with a camera at the end was launched to the very bottom of the mine. In the video, speleologists were able to discern the contours of a body littered with debris and stones. A gas cylinder and canister were also visible. It seemed that someone wanted to set fire to the mine with the body, but the lack of oxygen at such a depth would not allow the fire to flare up. The body was recovered from the bottom of the mine and taken by helicopter for examination. The fact that the body belonged to Erin Corwin could only be determined from the victim's dental records. The cause of death was also very difficult to establish. In the end, Experts agreed that the woman received a strong blow to the head and was then strangled. Chris Lee was urgently called from Alaska and taken into custody for first-degree murder with extreme cruelty. Chris and Erin actually met in Joshua Tree Park the day she went missing. A few days before, Chris told the girl that he had a special surprise for her, and Erin thought that he wanted to propose to her, which made her very happy and intrigued. But instead, the man Erin loved lured her deep into Joshua Tree National Park and killed her. At the trial, which began in October 2016, the prosecution easily established Chris's propensity for violence, as well as the motive for the murder. The man confessed to killing Erin Corwin, confirming all the evidence against him. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. It took them only 15 minutes to reach their verdict. Chris Lee was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I decided that I didn't want to live my whole life angry at my daughter's killer,
said Erin's mother.
He's already taken enough from me, and if I continue to be angry, then he'll take my life, my mind, and my heart. I won't give Chris Lee that due.
Thank you for your attention. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so as not to miss new videos.